Okay, here we are. Herpetological Highlights, episode 203. It's Ben's turn to guess the frog call. I've been kind to you, Ben. Last time we did this, you didn't give me a frog that had a common name. But I thought about being spiteful.
Yeah, but it was also something Jimmy.
It was, yeah. But also, I'd forgotten to get a frog call before we got on the call, and so didn't have much time to be too selective. So let's see if you can get this one. I will be willing to give you a clue.
I'd love a clue.
Yeah, because, I'd never heard of this frog. So it's from Australia.
Okay.
And it's small, we'll say that as well.
It does sound quite small.
I can give you another clue. It's called common something.
The common clicker frog.
No, it wasn't. Good guess, though. Here's a bit of a clicky one. This, to me...
It's a lovely sound. It feels like a sort of kinetic sculpture sort of sound to it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's
quite a beautiful
very
image
satisfying.
There. It reminds me of rolling multiple pebbles in the hand.
Yes, I can hear that too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like a stone chat. We have a bird here named after that too. But no, it's not the common... What did you say?
Clicker,
yeah. And a quick Google search will probably confirm that actually isn't a type of frog. No, this is in fact...
It's got a second name.
So this is in fact a frog called Crinia signifera, the common froglet.
I'm sorry, it's just called the common froglet.
Yeah, it's Australian. You know, Australians, they're very to the point with their names. They don't muck about.
Some of them are great. That one's not as great.
No, so it's from sort of southeast Queensland, south throughout New South Wales, into Victoria and the southeast corner of South Australia. So it's really broadly distributed in sort of eastern parts. Also occurs on the eastern side of Tasmania, apparently. So yeah, massive area of occurrence. Tends to be sort of found beneath rocks at the edges of creeks and ponds. Breeds year round, except for midsummer because it gets too hot. And yeah, they're actually a frog which isn't really considered to be threatened. Expanding urban developments aren't helping it, but they're so widely spread that no one's too concerned about them.
They can soak up the loss of habitat for now.
Yeah, and it kind of looks... It's small, being a froglet. Quite variable. Sort of looks... It's just got a very generically frog shape, big sticky out eyes, quite a pointy nose. Yeah, just a common ground-dwelling frog. It's in the family Myobatrachidae.
Lovely. And has a lovely call.
Yeah, they eat lots of mosquitoes. So yeah, quite good for human population if you've got something that eats mosquitoes. But there you go. So what's the score on this game? Is it still 2 each?
Almost certainly.
Yeah, it's 2-2, isn't it?
It's a major event when someone actually guesses something right.
I know, yeah. It's like, it just tends not to happen. But there we go. So yeah, nice little frog call to start us off. And the reason that I picked something from Australia is because we're actually doing a paper about an animal from Australia. So let's move on to our main paper for today. So this is a paper by Szabo, Hoefer and Whiting, 2020. Are lizards capable of inhibitory control? Performance on a semi-transparent version of the cylinder task in 5 species of Australian skinks, published in Behaviour, Ecology and Sociobiology.
Inhibitory control.
Inhibitory control.
Which people would probably best or be most familiar with, the classic marshmallow test, right? That's what that's aiming to test. There's a marshmallow placed in front of child or ape or someone who can listen to instructions. And the promise is that there will be more marshmallows if one can not eat that one immediately. But you're perfectly allowed, you either take the marshmallow immediately and consume it and enjoy your single marshmallow, or you use that inhibitory control for the promise of gaining more marshmallows down the line.
I don't even know if I'd pass it now, honestly.
Well, there we go. See, this is, yeah.
Although actually, to be honest, if I was going to be made to eat the marshmallows, I'd probably eat the one because I'm not a big fan.
Well, you're not made to eat them.
Would that be a form of inhibitory control? Eating the one so I don't have to eat the others later?
I think you would be cast out of the study for refusing to participate. You'd be like the lizards that don't learn.
Can I have chocolate instead? Like an iguana just refuses to take part.
Yeah.
This is beneath me. This is beneath me. I eat plants. I don't need this.
I'll have some lettuce later. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, most of the examples of inhibitory control in humans I seem to find online were just fat shaming. Like, yeah, inhibitory control is like not eating a piece of cake when you're trying to be on a diet, is like the example I kept seeing. But yours is way nicer. And I've seen videos of kids being given that test.
I think that's what that one's meant to be getting at. That's the classic that always comes to my mind anyway. It's the old marshmallow thing.
Scientists come back in the room, they're like, you couldn't resist, could you, fatty? But yeah, so the kids, I think most children just eat whatever's in front of them as soon as the adult leaves the room, because it's also like you've been told not to eat it. And so there's a bit of rebellion in there.
I mean, you've been told that you can eat it.
Oh, you've been told you can eat.
That you're allowed to eat it, but you'll get more if you don't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Because otherwise it would just be testing how likely you are to disobey instructions for the sake of a marshmallow.
And that's a test I could pass.
It needs that like restraint and going for, because that's the whole thing with the inhibitory control. It's putting more time or effort for the sake of greater reward or for sake of reward, right? That's the principle.
Yeah, you're trying to resist the urge to do something in order to get a payoff in another way.
Yes.
Yeah, there are a few ways to do it. And obviously inhibitory control is really necessary unless you want to be a really basic, dumb animal. So there's a few ways that we test this. You can do reversal tasks. So you establish that a specific stimulus gets a reward and then you change it. And so the animals have to resist doing what they've learned gets the reward and form a new association with a stimulus which previously didn't get them a reward. So an example of this would be you press a blue button and a little grape rolls out. You get to eat the grape. And you keep pressing the blue button and you get more grapes. But then suddenly you press the blue button. Oh, no, you don't. Suddenly they change it so that the red button, instead of the blue button, gives them the grape. They have to form a new association between the red button and the grape and lose their obsession with the blue button. If you're a real stupid animal, you might just keep pressing the blue indefinitely and never consider the red. There's another one called the A not B, which is where they hide a reward. So say they hide something under little mat marked A. So the subject sees that it's under there. But then while the subject's observing the researcher, they lift up the mat and they move the treat from under A to B while they're seeing it. And then they need to subsequently ignore A and go to B to get the reward, despite knowing that at some stage A had the reward. Like, can they lose their obsession with A to go to B, having seen that it's changed?
Yes. Can they sort of inhibit the instinct to go straight to where they think it would be for the sake of new information?
Or the third way that they do it, which is the one that we're going to be talking about here with the lizards, is the detour test. So an animal can see the stimulus, but not get it. They have to resist the urge to try and grab it, but they have to detour around the barrier to get it. So they might be able to see it, they might not be able to see it. It depends on the exact test. But essentially you have to resist the urge to try and just blast through and think about it and go round.
Yes, it's that sort of abstraction of, okay, what do I need to get item as opposed to just brute force my way through until I get it.
Exactly, yeah. And so in this study, we have a version of the detour test called the cylinder test. And so animals are first trained to make a detour to the side opening of a cylinder that they can't see through, which contains a reward, but it's invisible to them as they approach. So basically they learn that there's a cylinder. If they just bump into it, nothing happens. They have to go round it to get the treat. And then after that, they replace the cylinder, which they can't see through, with a transparent cylinder. And so by that point, they know that they have to go round to get something. Can they then translate that knowledge of going round from a cylinder they can't see through to one where they can see the thing? It's right there. Why can't I get it?
But they have to resist the urge just to go straight for it.
Exactly. And, you know, your generic clever animals perform best at this. So great apes, like you mentioned, humans, and the like corvids, so crows and things. They're notoriously brainy. But also dingoes, dogs, and cats are all really good at working this out.
And spotted hyenas.
And spotted hyenas.
Yeah, because they highlight in the intro, I think it's in the intro, maybe it's in the discussion, but you've got these two sort of, not necessarily competing, but two hypotheses for what can drive like higher cognition and sort of animals getting smarter. One is a greater sort of variety of diet. So the ability to eat more stuff and have to deal with more problems in getting that stuff can make you smarter. The other one is more social animals can become more intelligent. They're obviously dealing with each other and need higher cognition for that. And that can also help with their problem solving and things like that. So you've got these two, they're not exclusive. And, you know, they obviously have different levels of support in different animals. And, you know, they're just these sort of general ideas of how intelligence may develop in animals and how that might bleed over to something like this inhibitory behaviour task.
Yeah, I like that. So sociality and complex diet make you need to get cleverer. And obviously we had both, didn't we? So
that's the idea, yeah.
But yeah, it also speaks to the fact that those iguanas from ages ago couldn't work out how to open the door. Well, they just They mostly eat leaves, so it's like they don't really need any skills.
Why would they need to open a door? The plant's right there.
Yeah, leaves don't try and get away. I reckon, what they called imps of darkness. Those,
The marine iguanas.
yeah, I bet you they're dumb. What do? They just swim out and eat algae all day. Although I suppose they have to make some decisions about the waves and stuff.
I was going to say 3D space and the sort of dealing with that sort of quite dynamic,
Yeah.
changing landscape of the ocean. They're going to have different parts of their brain more developed than others. They're probably not great at opening doors.
And intelligence is all relative, isn't it? It depends what you need to do.
Yes. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms, isn't it? Is what you actually mean by intelligent is solving. Because, this is a classic example. Again, I always think of it as there's a wonderful story of people testing various monkeys doing good at task, and then these gibbons looking particularly stupid. They can't do the task. And it wasn't because they were stupid. It's because the task involved a very certain sort of manipulation, and gibbons' hands weren't suited to it. So it wasn't necessarily an intelligence thing. It was like, gibbon hands weren't right for the task. And that sort of gave the other apes an unfair advantage, but if you were to compare them.
Oh, that's really sad. Poor gibbons.
Yeah. It's like trying to get a frog to type on a keyboard. It's not really fair, is it?
I don't know. Some of those dart frogs from a couple of weeks ago probably have thousands of words per minute with their toe tapping.
I doubt it, because I don't think that they could exert enough force to actuate a key.
Useless.
Their entire home range, their entire territory is the size of a keyboard.
Yeah.
They'd be knackered after 2 words.
Anyway, we shouldn't laud our species' intelligence over the other animals. It's not really fair. So yeah, in this study they were looking at, fair play. They got a whole bunch of skinks for this. They got five. Well, they did 4 species, and there was existing data from another one. Should we just quickly blast through the lizard species that they used?
Yes.
Yeah, so we had tree skinks, Egernia striolata, which are these like medium-sized diurnal omnivorous lizards. They're mostly arboreal rocky habitats. Then they had Gidgee skinks, which are medium-sized, slightly stockier than tree skinks. They're active in the day. Omnivorous lizards, again, arid or semi-arid rocky habitats. Then they had sleepy lizards, those big chunky guys, Tilica rugosa, that is, and Gidgee skinks are Egernia stokesi, for anyone interested. But yeah, sleepy lizards are these like massive, day-active. They're omnivorous, so
they're kind of built. They're funny.
They are amazing, yeah. They're omnivorous, and they're found in mostly arid habitats, and they are terrestrial, so they're on the floor. They're really big and heavy, and they're the really adorable ones that like mate for life and potter about together, and they're just generally quite adorable. And then you got eastern blue-tongued skinks, which are like the big brutes of the study, very large-bodied, active in the day, and again omnivorous, so they eat a bunch of different stuff, but both fruit and berries and flowers and slugs and snails and bugs and anything they can get in their mouths, I imagine, that can move around. And then another study had already done this with the water skink, Eulamprus guii. But all of these lizards are Australian skinks, and they're all in the group, the sort of Egernia group, which is this big radiation of skinks with 7 genera and 50 species. Australia's got so many skinks to choose from. And so, yeah, they were basically trying to get these skinks to perform this task, but there was a few phases to it, wasn't there? They couldn't just go straight into the task. They needed a bit of education.
Yes. So first most important task is to make sure that the skinks all have a food which is going to be satisfactorily motivating for them to participate in the task. So all these different skinks had different foods that they preferred. Okay, job number 1, sorted. Find their favorite food. Job number 2 was to provide them, basically get them used to the test setup. So before any cylinders introduced, you're just feeding the skinks in a sort of controlled manner in the place where they're going to be tested from a little sort of petri dish thing where they can see the food, they can go get it, and they can enjoy it. Excellent. At that point, you're going to remove lizards that won't play ball. You don't want the troublemakers. That's not going to be helpful, right? You need a baseline of lizards that you know can take part in the task.
They have to demonstrate they have the skills required, don't they?
Yeah. And the pre-training, everybody succeeded. Every skink did good.
Yeah.
So after that, it's the opaque cylinder aspect to the test, where you're placing the food in an opaque cylinder and seeing if the lizards can work out that they have to go around the cylinder to get to the food. And the cylinder, again, it's a wonderful study for how much control they put into sort of fixing cylinder size and how far the lizard was away from the cylinder, all controlled for by how big the lizard is. Because all these different species and the different individuals are all different sizes, but you want to keep the sort of relative distances and everything all as similar as you can. So they had their customized tubes and their customized distances to control for that, which I thought was kind of excellent.
Yeah, it's a nice little setup.
So yeah, opaque cylinder, see how well they do at that. Ones that learn successfully get to move on to the next phase. Basically, they had to do adequately with this opaque cylinder. So 4 out of 5 consecutive trials, they had to actually do it right.
Yeah, they have to demonstrate they have some idea that they have to go round and find the thing.
Any idea of how the cylinder operates? What are you testing when you show them a semi-transparent one? They're just going to fail even more consistently at that, probably.
When they were conducting these trials, they must have laughed so much. Like, just the idea of these lizards, some of them just being like less capable. Like, what is a relatively simple task? Like, go round, find the food in the hole. And some of the time they're just like, yeah, it's not happening. But, you know, like you say, they mostly worked it out.
Mostly, yeah. What they had, 5 tree skinks. Lizards that did not reach this criteria were not tested in the semi-transparent cylinder phase. So 5 tree skinks.
How many were there, though?
Oh, how many tree skinks did they have? 12.
12. So 5 out of 12 worked it out.
I think 5 out of 12 failed it.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
If I'm reading this correctly, because blue tongue skinks, they have n equals 0, but I'm pretty sure blue tongue skinks made it through to the second phase.
All the blue tongue skinks worked out the opaque cylinder. They worked it out, yeah.
Basically, the general thing is the majority of individuals got past this first stage, I think is the broad way of summarizing that. And onto the semi-transparent stage, where they can see the food in the cylinder, but they still have to detour around it to get it. And so then the test is how quickly do they learn and how quickly do they, or how well do they sort of do it without just bumping into the cylinder initially, indicating that they're going straight for the food as opposed to exercising this inhibitory control and going around, and the sensible way to get at something in a cylinder.
And so then they moved on to the semi-transparent stage, right?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yeah, the semi-transparent stage.
Sorry, that was the semi-transparent stage. My mistake.
It's the same test, right? It's just you've got a different cylinder in place.
Yeah, so it stops being whether they can work out to go round, and it starts being whether they can work out to ignore the thing that they can see and then go round.
Exactly. But you already know that they have the sort of mental acumen to go around and get into the cylinder. You know that they know that because they passed that initial test.
Yeah. And they were also interested in like whether sex, whether they were from captivity or the wild, or whether they had experience with other similar but different tests had an impact on the success of the lizards. And none of these things made a difference. So the males and females were equal. And similarly, captive versus non-captive, there was no evidence that they're sort of stupider for being in captivity. And the previous experience didn't help them either. And yeah, broadly speaking, the blue tongues were the best, right? They're probably the cleverest.
They seem to be... So there's 2 sorts of measures of cleverness, I would say, because you had the blue tongues that seemed to be just better in general, but you also had the Gidgee stinks and the sleepy lizards that they were the most improved. So
everyone knows most improved player is actually a slight of an award to get because it means you sucked at the start.
They had the best indication that they were learning.
That's also not true. There's a lot of merit in improvement. So if you've recently won a most improved player award, don't be put off. So they're capable of learning. One thing they also said was interesting was that the blue-tongued skinks seemed to perform better if they had lower body condition.
Yeah, if they were more desperate for food, potentially.
So that's quite an interesting finding as well, which they kind of didn't intend necessarily. It wasn't something they were like deliberately testing. It just kind of so happened that they scored the body condition before they did it. You know, they didn't intentionally starve any lizards to see if they became better at working stuff out. But they did realize that actually, yeah, if they're sort of hungrier, maybe they're a bit more motivated, which is kind of cool as well. Yeah, it's interesting to think about cognitive performance changing with hunger. Obviously, there's a cutoff where the degree of hunger becomes costly because your brain's not working properly. But if you're more hungry, more determined, it's quite a cool idea.
And so we sort of skirted around this, but there's a sentence in the discussion that sums up the sort of key finding. And it's importantly, none of the tested species learnt to detour around a semi-transparent cylinder.
So that doesn't really speak to the intelligence of any of them, does it?
It doesn't seem so. They didn't get better as they went with more trials with that semi-transparent cylinder. So it just seems like the level of control they have is what they have. They don't have that flexibility, which is, I think, slightly surprising because there was learning apparently appearing with the solid cylinder. So it's not that they can't learn because it's demonstrated in the previous test. It's just that maybe that learning capability either needs more time, or maybe that just drive for food is too strong. It's like, whatever, I'm not going to learn. I'm going to go straight for the food when they can see it.
Maybe when it comes to their prey, they never really have to inhibit their feelings. Like if it's there, they just always grab.
Exactly. It could be something along those lines. It might just not be a useful skill for these guys.
Yeah. Or there's just a limited amount of stuff that you can pack into a skink brain and it's already full up.
Could be. Yeah, because they do go on to sort of chat about those two hypotheses I brought up, the sort of ecological intelligence and social intelligence ones of, more varied diet versus social. So yeah, all these skinks did have sort of different setups in terms of diet and sociality, but weirdly, the blue tongues, blue tongues tend to be solitary.
Yeah.
But also were seemingly doing better at these tests. So it doesn't seem like socialness is particularly supported as a driver here for this inhibitory control.
No, but there again, these lizards are all very different in size, right? Like blue tongues are massive and they have these big whopping heads. So there is a bit more space for a brain in there.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know how those figs tally up.
They don't really mention it in this, which makes me think maybe it's a bit of a red herring. But I've read in the past that like brain size is pretty well correlated with intelligence in many ways. Like the bigger your brain is, the better you are at doing stuff.
I think that's pretty well documented for mammals. I think the rules slightly change with bird and reptile brains.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because they're set up differently. And I don't know if that correlation is as strong in them because they have different ways around it, I believe.
But yeah, so slightly different performances by these different lizards. They don't seem like they're that bright, I guess would be the main conclusion.
Well, they had some, I think the other sort of side conclusion was this neophobia sort of bit of it, of different species having a different level of bravery to this scenario and a willingness to investigate the cylinder.
Right, yeah. So neophobia is like a fear of new things.
Yes. And it seemed like tree skinks were kind of out there as being much more neophobic than the other species.
So they're just not so curious and interested in new things.
Potentially, yeah. They sort of highlight in the discussion that it might be a motivation thing for those guys. Potentially that, their food that was chosen out for them wasn't as strong a motivator. It's the iguana problem again, potentially.
Yeah. Well, there we go. So, a really thorough study on the cognition of skinks in Australia.
They would eat the marshmallow.
They would eat the marshmallow. They'd bash straight into it without even giving it a second's thought. They wouldn't give it a second's thought. Bless them. Yeah, so there we go. Skinks. So, have you got any other business for this week, Ben?
I don't know. That's kind of me.
No, nor me. That's it for me. So, if you want to get in touch with us, perhaps we've made a mistake, you want to give us a correction, herphighlights@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can at patreon.com/herphighlights. We sell stuff at redbubble.com/herphighlights too, if you want to buy a t-shirt or a mug or literally anything, a bedspread with our logo on it, if for some reason that's what you want. And yeah, you will catch us next week. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.